I remember a few years ago in the newsroom, we would often need to get someone to comment on a crime, justice, or policing story. You've been in a situation where you needed an interview to fill airtime, but you couldn't get anyone new on that particular angle that day and you were running out of time. So we would ring this one chap who would always be available, always have a quote and an opinion, and seem to be able to back it up with first-hand knowledge because he was a former police officer and because he ran a group apparently about criminal justice. He was our go-to, and he probably got more coverage than any other individual commentator on the London-wide news radio show I presented at the time, and on media generally as well. A lot of clients and bosses ask to be turned into thought leaders today, but in a world of thought leaders, how do you do it? What can we learn from him and from other major niche thought leaders who are in the news almost every day currently? We'll be breaking down how others are doing it in today's Public Relations podcast, but there's also lots more. As we're talking about targeting the next generation of journalists, how influencers charge, and we've got some interesting listener questions and some interesting comments from an agency in Malta and a senior figure in Reuters who's been commenting as well on the show. So stay with us for this week's Public Relations podcast. There is so much coming up.
The Public Relations Podcast with Richard Midson.
We have a delay in getting out the latest show, and you can probably see from the background behind me if you are watching this on YouTube that I'm in a hotel room currently in Munich, Germany. But you would have known that if you are getting the free newsletter, which of course comes out with the Public Relations Podcast every week, which you can get at publicrelationspodcast.com. It was so good to have David on from Carve Communications 2 weeks ago, talking about event PR. I hope you enjoyed that show and some of the stunts that he gets up to. There was a great story actually I spotted from Vox Media. It's a conference that takes place in California where a firm called Clockwork had brought its robot manicure, or as they were calling it, the minicure machine, to this particular event. I couldn't see how it does nail filing itself, but it painted nails. And what a great way to leave a lasting impression on creators or PR people or journalists or whatever going along to this event to come home with their nails done, or if they're blood, why not? Whoever you are, you can have your nails done at this particular event and remind yourself of what's going on. Now, I am delighted this week to chew the cud of the latest PR techniques because I am joined by a friend of the show, Kayley Hamilton. And Kayley, hello, first of all. I'm going to sing your praises first because you are a 2-time Emmy Award-winning entertainment journalist and you are a PR now. You run your own agency called Up Level. I just love it when I get to talk to Kayley as we get to talk about celeb culture. And in this particular case, I know she's going to have a lot of thoughts on this week's main topic about thought leaders and personal branding as well. But that is how I would describe you, Kayley. How would you describe yourself to everyone?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to be back. I always love chatting with you. You just get it. We have like similar backgrounds and you're so knowledgeable. So I really appreciate you having me. But yeah,
I'm not bouncing off you because we have these different perspectives on things. I love it. But go on.
I
I'm
know. It's wonderful. I know. But yeah, my background is originally in entertainment news journalism, celebrity reporting, and I worked at Entertainment Tonight, Us Weekly magazine, outlets like that for about 7 years before pivoting and starting my agency. And we now don't work with celebrities. We more so work with founders who might have clients as celebrities, but we work to get them exposure in the media. So yeah, I love to work with really purpose-driven and kind of heart-centered as well. Founders who are just super inspiring and have like a really impactful message to share. So just kind of pivoting my background in media to knowing how to get them in the spotlight and kind of transferring that Hollywood limelight to people outside of Hollywood.
There is so much good. I mean, we're going to talk about it throughout the whole show. Why don't we just get on with the show? Because we're going to get so much of your insight into this one today. A couple of stories that we spotted first of all. Let's start with those. This is the first one I spotted. If you're an experienced PR, then you may find that you don't naturally understand young journalists in newsrooms. And well, as you can probably tell if you're watching on YouTube, I'm not 21 anymore. So this probably does apply to me. It was an observation made by Stephen Chai recently, a presenter and senior editor at Channel News Asia, when he spoke at the recent PR Asia conference in Singapore. And he made the point that the mindset of journalists has changed just like society, and younger journalists may view the world in different ways to older ones. So what can we make of this latest news story? I mean, my first thought, Kayley, on this one is that, when I first started in journalism, it was it was hammered into me about objectivity. It's not opinionated. It is pure facts. Let the listener decide. And journalism to me now, I mean, you mentioned the word earlier, which was purpose driven. So many journalists now, I think, see themselves as being on a kind of a campaigning, social justice kind of perspective, which is very different how it started when I was there. What do you make of this news story?
Yeah, it's so interesting. Thank you for finding it and bringing it up. Yeah, back in the day, it was definitely all objectivity and what's the hard news, the hard facts. Let's report and move on and just get the news out. But especially now that news is transmuted through social media, like so many people get their news through social media posts. And it's like news media outlets have to be so tactical when it comes to how they post on social media in order to get those clicks from the post over to the article. So it's interesting what this with this information that
Leave it
came
here.
out, just thinking about when you're going to pitch a story to maybe younger journalists in a newsroom, it's like you kind of have to think through the lens of maybe social media. Like what is that hook? What could be a potential like caption, and which is kind of the way that we think about it, like, with the email subject line, would that be a snazzy engaging hook for a social media post? It's like thinking through the lens of social media. And it also made me remember that something that I recently read and just was reminded of is how people's attention spans, and obviously this goes with like the younger generation. I mean, they're dropping from, it was 12 seconds to 8 seconds since the year 2000. And mind you, a goldfish attention span is in 9 seconds. So goldfish have longer attention spans than the average person today.
That's a really good point, actually. Because I mean, I did this on LinkedIn the other day where I got quite annoyed about a press release that just waffled on, and I did this video where I just talked about it. And it's like the headlines we used to get were reasonably long, but you'd get the pitch in that sort of sentence. But it sounds like what you're actually saying now is that when you write a headline to grab a journalist's attention, you've actually got to think, what could they write on TikTok or in that tiny caption you get on an Instagram reel that people are going to see straight away, isn't it? So actually, you've got to write your headline in four, maybe 5 words rather than a sentence.
Right. And it's really comes down to creativity. It's like thinking like a journalist, thinking like even like a Gen Z journalist in the newsroom, and thinking about, okay, what would stop them in their tracks if they were to read this email subject line, or if this pitch about my client were to be turned into a TikTok video or an Instagram reel. And so you have to kind of think like that and ask the right questions to your clients that will pull out the really intriguing kind of behind the scenes transparency, something, maybe different that isn't being reported, just anything super unique that you can turn into a really juicy
And a
hook
short.
when reaching out, because you need to get their attention.
That's a real good point, though, because it's like I'm writing longer sentences. I mean, not long sentences, but it's like thinking. I really struggle to write in a kind of 4-word headline. Do you have a mindset for kind of making something that short?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I actually read this in a book recently, and it was like you have to think about, say you're trying to capture the attention of somebody, whether it's a journalist, and say that they are literally in the middle of like their busiest day, or maybe they're driving to work and then their car broke down and they're having issues at home. Just like just not an ideal day, and definitely not a time where they're going to drop everything and look at your email. But you have to create like the subject line of the email, or if we're talking in terms of social media, like what is that hook that will, in the middle of, her car breaking down, she happens to open her phone and sees the beginning of that subject line email or the beginning of that video, and she actually stops in her tracks and is like, wait, what's that? And it actually does capture her attention in that like millisecond of her crazy, crazy day. So it's like getting
That's a brilliant way of
super
putting it.
creative and thinking from that perspective.
Yeah. Let's
Yeah.
move on to your story. Taylor Swift. This is the one you spotted. I mean, it keeps going on, doesn't it? But my gosh, she's good. What's out of the millions of PR techniques that we can get out of her? What's the kind of thing that you've grabbed at the moment?
Yes, oh my gosh. Well, over the weekend, she and Travis Kelce, the football player, were on my entire feed. And like my whole Instagram feed is a lot of news sources and celebrity sources too. Obviously, I've worked in the celebrity industry, but I was just like mind boggled. It's like that's when you know that that news is just literally everywhere. So I just found it so interesting that in between, the humongous success of her Eras tour, she took maybe like a few, not even a few months break before starting it back up again in Argentina. She released her live concert, movie experience that happened in between, but also as if the media needed like more to talk about with her, but it was just brilliant. Like it was perfect timing in between her ending the Eras tour and then getting back into the tour in Argentina this past week of her perfectly starting a relationship with this pretty well-known football player and her going to the games and bringing the friends. And oh my gosh, it's been top of the news cycle for a few weeks. And, just her coming out and flaunting that relationship. And then just this past weekend is when it was all over my news feed when she started back up on her Eras tour in Argentina. He was in the crowd, there's social media of him standing there. She changed, and this is like the PR part. It's like so intentional and brilliant, and she knows exactly what's going to make a headline. She changed one of the lyrics of her song to like mention him as a Chiefs
Oh,
football player in her song Karma. Yeah, it was that. And that same night, she knows that when she's leaving the stage, she's like waving to the crowd, waving to her fans. Obviously, everyone has their cell phones out. And then Travis, her new boyfriend, is standing at the very edge of backstage. So people can see him and she's done waving. And then she immediately runs to him, jumps into his arms. They kiss, show a little PDA, and then walk away. And of course, somebody caught that like perfectly on film. And then that went viral. So the mixture of those two things from that first like 2 nights of her concert, like, oh my gosh, it's just
how
brilliant.
planned do you think this is? I mean, she's obviously very savvy in terms of knowing and spotting a moment, but how pre-planned do you think this is? And how much do you think she's just going, I've just spotted an opportunity, I'll do that now?
Yeah. Obviously, her changing the lyrics is planned, and she knows that's gonna cause a frenzy. I think intentionally, like, going out to dinner with him in the city and having him stand at the show, I think that is kind of planned, but what isn't planned is who she is and how she is, like, her excitability, and she's clearly so in love, like, her running to the stage to kiss him, I think that's very genuine. And and that's who she is, like, she can be super authentic because she's so loved for exactly who she is. Obviously, there's always haters, but her
Yeah.
fans just adore her. So and then when it comes to, like, going to the games, she wants to go to the games to support her boyfriend, but also she knows that it's gonna cause news, and then she brings, celebrities like Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds to come sit with her. It's like she knows that'll bring news, but that's also who she is. She's a very like, she has so many friends that everybody knows, so she wants to do that as well. So I think she knows that it'll create headlines, but I think she just does what she wants to do because she's
It
Taylor
works. It
Swift.
works, doesn't it? I mean, that's it. Oh gosh, we could talk about that one for hours as well. Moving on, next story I spotted was Creator IQ. They're an influencer platform that's come out with a report on the influencer economy. One notable quote that I noticed there was that they said that a majority of our creators, 61%, only receive compensation for less than a quarter of their content, which looks like it from what it means. I haven't had a chance to speak to the people behind this one, but it looks like it basically means that not everyone is getting paid for coverage. People often say, well, you have to pay for influencers. But looking at that, it looks like there is still an opportunity to get genuine earned coverage from influencers. What's your thought on that from what they said?
It's really interesting with influencers getting paid, not getting paid, depending on what the partnership is. In my opinion, I think it's, of course, very important to pay influencers if they are to promote like a product or a service and create content around it. It's basically an ad. However, if they are promoting slash more so partnering with maybe a person, so even if you have a business or a product, but you go on an Instagram live with an influencer, or that's why a lot of influencers have podcasts, like
Mm.
they interview people. I think when it comes to like the storytelling of a person being promoted, quote unquote, on an influencer platform, I think that should more so be considered earned media
Mhm.
because it can be mutually beneficial. Both people can tap into one another's audiences. The influencer can get another like side to a story or an expert that they want to introduce to their audiences or give some sort of information. Just get more content by interviewing an actual person about their business or their expertise
And it
in
helps
whatever it
both sides
is.
out, doesn't it? It's a mutually beneficial partnership.
It's mutually beneficial. Yeah.
Mm.
So I think in that case, I think it should be considered earned if it's technically less so like a promotion and more so just a partnership. Um, yeah, that's what
But
I
it's
think.
still interesting, isn't it? I mean, my concern always with the paid or with a lot of paid influencer content is that it can be pretty inauthentic at times. And it's like, one of the key things obviously is making sure that you're actually doing a deal with an influencer who genuinely cares about your product in the first place, even if you are paying them. Um,
Right.
but it just feels that as much as you can keep away from that direct payment and have some kind of partnership, you're going to get a more authentic thing out of them.
So true. And something else that's interesting, because I have a handful of clients that work in the like creator economy, that they have agencies and work with influencers. And what I keep hearing, and especially seeing the numbers of how much the bigger influencers are getting paid versus the smaller creators with quote like smaller follower following, brands are not wanting to pay the big bucks for one giant creator influencer to post anymore. Like they really want volume. So it's an interesting turn in the tide with smaller creators just having more, um, yeah, just having more demand for these brands, which I
Mm.
think is interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting because actually this particular company that did this survey, they shared some figures on how much influencers were being paid. It wasn't actually in the report, which was frustrating, but they shared it with, I think it was Ad Age. And I won't quote all the figures because obviously that was an exclusive for them, but it's like they said that I think it was the small and nano influencers were getting paid something like under $500 per post. For the bigger ones, it was something like $50 to $100,000 per post. And but if I'm thinking about it from a client's perspective, I'm saying, okay, well, I'm happy to pay 100,000, but are you going to give me $1 million in a return on investment? And
I
I wonder
know.
how many influencers can say, yes, I will give you a positive ROI on this. You know, it's just when you're talking that kind of money, I want to see a return. It's that simple. It's like this isn't a joke. It's not a charity.
And that just makes me nervous. I mean, like, I'm not an expert in social media marketing, but like just knowing enough and knowing how often the algorithm changes every single
Mhm.
day, even if an influencer has incredible case studies and incredible return, you just never know. Like, what if they post on the wrong day? And like, what if it gets buried or anything can
Mhm.
happen? So it would just make me nervous if my client were to pay big bucks for just a
Yeah.
handful of posts with one person.
Yeah, it's a real risk, isn't it? You are listening to the Public Relations Podcast on all good podcast platforms, and also now as an experiment on YouTube as well, with me, Richard Midson, and the wonderful Kayley Hamilton from uplevelagency.com, from the Up Level Agency. Still, to come, we're going to be dissecting a case study of how a scientist became a huge thought leader and personality, and how perhaps we can all apply the techniques that he used and his PR team used to get coverage for our clients and organizations as well. And Katie will have lots of ideas on that, as well as someone promoting thought leaders herself. But this is the part of the show where we talk about a campaign that our guest has been working on at the moment to find a bit about what they've been learning about the latest strategies that they've been trying as well. So, Kaylee, it's kind of over to you. Tell us a bit about what you've been up to, what you're working on, and what you've been finding with this campaign as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we're just getting into like the throes of this campaign, but I think it's so interesting. So my client, He owns a creator platform called Sound.me, and they just recently hit 1 million users. And it's creators all over the world, and it's any type of creator. You don't have to have a certain following. And they're starting with TikTok, and it's basically meant to connect creators with music artists, and it can be big artists or up and coming. And they use that platform to amplify music on TikTok. So basically, connecting with creators, having them create content along to a certain song to help it go viral, to help with streams, so on and so forth. But what's so interesting about this is I love working with multifaceted founders. Like my client, he is an expert in building this creator platform. He's an expert in music marketing, influencer marketing. He used to be a musician. His background's really interesting. He actually used to manage a boy band back in the day. So he has very much been in the music scene. So he has that expertise. And then, of course, the topic of AI, which is on the,
Yeah, who
the
isn't
head
talking,
of
right? Yeah.
who isn't talking about AI. And so his platform, of course, uses AI to basically create transparent compensation prices for these creators. And the AI is trained to kind of check out their content and just analyze what their content and what their post would be worth. So it's very transparent for both sides. And it's just interesting because it's kind of eliminating a little bit the like need for agency negotiations. So that's really interesting. And he also created something called trigger markets, which basically, if the US can be really saturated with songs. And so if one song happens to be getting a little bit of traction in Brazil or something, a client can or an artist can use this platform to trigger that market and basically hone in on creators that are all in Brazil and just kind of trigger it to the next city and have it be worldwide, have it grow. So there's just so many different aspects to this campaign that are
It's
super
really very
unique.
so how have you approached it? Because there are a lot of different aspects to this.
Yeah. So, first of all, since he has so many different types of expertise, I love to definitely start with we do multiple things. Like, we always do queries first and foremost. So, if a journalist, I mean, he can speak on AI, he can speak on influencer marketing, music, and just being a founder in general. So, if whenever there are journalists looking for his expertise, we're always getting him to quote on the latest there. And then just for features, we're really leaning into, and we're actually going to put this out soon, that the platform has hit 1 million users. So obviously the number 1 million is a big, feat. So
Yeah.
we're leaning into that. We're leaning into the AI side, but you do have to be really intentional and make it really unique with AI because it is so saturated with all of the AI stories. So I think it is interesting that, it's eliminating kind of the agency side of things and really streamlining the process. And then getting him on podcasts, of course, like talking about all of his different types of expertise. So, yeah.
So what's the main sort of hook that you're finding? It's really interesting point you said about the AI and it's a saturated space. So what are the kind of hooks that you're getting the reaction from creators and journalists? What is it that they're kind of going at the moment? We're interested. You know what it's like. PR's changing, society's changing all the time, stories are changing all the time. What are the kind of hooks that you're finding are people responding to at the moment?
I feel like it's always something that people haven't really heard before, and it's hard. It's not like it's hard to know what people haven't heard. I actually had him speak with a reporter at Billboard recently, and I was just kind of a fly on the wall, just listening to their conversation. And she would mention some things like she mentioned the trigger market part and how she's never really heard of, say, music artists who say they want to promote a specific concert in a specific city. She's never really heard of artists using influencers to do that because, you know, concerts are, it's kind of a one and done thing. It takes a lot of effort to find an agency in a specific city and get the influencers and make it about volume as well. And like, that's never really been a thing. So that was something that really interested her. So it's important to like And it's hard to get that feedback, but I was lucky to just hear that conversation.
Yeah, so
And just
that's
to
a
be
hook
aware
that you
of
can use with others now as well, I suppose, don't you?
yeah, exactly. And just like seeing, and I always like to ask my clients, like, what is there anything out there that has not been talked about? Like, is there something happening in your industry where you're like, why is somebody talking about this? And usually they have an array of things, and they're the go-to expert, and they know the most about their industry. So they usually give me an answer of like, yeah, this is new. Nobody's doing this. I'm like, okay, let's hone in on that.
I mean, I suppose one of the challenges with that, though, is what the creators can be like is that they can come up with a million things and they go, I'm really excited about this. And yet, when you go and talk to journalists, they'll have their own idea about what they're excited about. So it's often finding, isn't it? It's those couple of topics that resonate between the person that's trying to push the story and the journalist that wants to hear it. I mean, I always keep thinking back to this example where I met this guy who was developing electric battery technology years ago, and he was trying to tell me all about the technical side of it. And he was clearly really excited, but I just didn't understand what he was talking about. And it was only when he
Yeah.
said something like the fact of, well, if, and I kept saying to him, well, what do you mean? What do you mean? And when he finally said, oh, it means that you'll be able to drive cars double the distance. It's like, there's the story. There's the story. Now you can tell me about your chemical stuff. Now I want to know what the hook is, because once you've got that match between what the journalist is excited about and what they want to push, then you've got a story, haven't you? It's that difficult thing.
It's so true. It's so true. It's like really simplifying it to the level of like, okay, would a fifth grader understand what you're creating? And yeah, sometimes it is hard to pull that out. And sometimes even I like get sucked into the nitty-gritty details. And you're right, like they get very excited about their stuff. So it gets me excited. And then I'm like, okay, wait, we have to like pump the brakes, reel it in a little bit, simplify it.
Yeah, be really cynical, be really awkward with them and say, yes, but.
I know it's true, but you have to do that as the expert. And it is good to be like a little bit blissfully ignorant at first. That's my favorite part, is like going into a campaign with fresh eyes and thinking from the perspective of, okay, that's not super interesting. Okay, yes, that's really interesting. Let's like zone in on that.
I remember us talking last time, and we were both saying about this, was that when you're talking to a client, you have to actually be a journalist. We have to go back into journalist mode and grill them as a journalist rather than thinking from a PR or publicity perspective. We have to be devil's advocate with them to try and pull out the really interesting angles with them. Taking
It's
on that journalist
true.
mindset again.
I know, and you have to feel comfortable enough to kind of push them a little bit, and it can be hard because, you're building that relationship, they're your client. Um, so yeah, you have to tread a little bit and find a good balance, but also the whole point of why they're working with you is to get that amazing exposure. So it's like you have to do what you got to do to get the story.
Final question on this one. PR as a society, as I say, is always changing. Is there anything that you've spotted in this particular campaign which is kind of new or different that you think is a reflection of where we are now? I mean, you've mentioned a few of them already because this is quite cutting edge, but anything else just in terms of the PR side of things, the strategy?
Mm. That's a good question. Gosh. I feel like anything new. Nothing
Anything that's
super
really
poignant is
stood
coming.
out? Yeah.
I know. It's like I feel like I'm in it all the time so much. I'm like, is that new or am I like just really used to it already? Um I feel like it always comes back to the person behind the product, but the person behind the service. And that's always something that clients, don't really they don't realize like how interesting their story can be, and they don't also might not feel comfortable sharing like who they are. They're like, "No, it's just about my business, just about my product." But even with this campaign, it's like showing journalists that he was super successful managing a boy band back in the day and how he has this music background. And then he went to MIT to study data science, and now he works with AI. And just like pulling that whole entire story together really nicely and cohesively. and really humanizing the person behind this product. I think that I feel like it always comes back to that because it's like, we're all humans talking to humans and they're like, okay, who is this? Who is this person? Um, yeah,
I remember that was
that.
something you said. I remember you said this last time as well about the same thing. You said one of the problem with some of the celebrities that don't get the coverage is the problem is that they don't reveal enough about themselves. And that's what we're all fascinated by. And it hasn't necessarily got to be your love life, but it's got to be something kind of intimate, something private. That's what this was what you were saying last time, the entertainment journalists, that's
Mhm.
what you're looking for, isn't it? It's not what they're promoting. It's a little bit about them or their insight behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's their insight, and especially if it's something that's like makes a journalist feel like, it's like behind the scenes, nobody knows about it. It's like our client can be a source to this information. Us as journalists, it's like sources are everything. Sources are gold. So if your journalist can be a source for new information or happenings that are going on in the industry, then yeah, hop on that because that will really intrigue journalists.
Awesome. Let's move on. Still to come, the community bag. We've got some great comments as well coming up in a few moments' time. So this is the part of the show now where we break down what other people are doing in a particular area of PR to pull what we think are perhaps the best techniques out of them and just see if we can brainstorm some of the ideas from them too. And by the way, if you want to get more of this sort of stuff, then I write my own detailed assessments of these in ways that you can apply yourself. These are my opinions in the Public Relations Podcast project at prology.com as well. So let's do this. Let's have a look at this particular example that we pulled out for this week. Now, if you search for the name Neil deGrasse Tyson, and his name comes up in multiple news stories somewhere almost every day, but it wasn't always that way. In 2014, the astrophysicist was barely known like so many clients or wannabe thought leaders. His pivotal moment came when he appeared on a show called Cosmos, a Space-Time Odyssey. Now, you might think to yourself, okay, he got on network TV in an era where there were fewer shows, and that is almost impossible today. But what people often don't realize is the work that was done to get him to that point, and after that show too, and to accelerate his career from there. When you look at the approach Neil and his PRs took, they utilized a huge blend of techniques from things like public speaking, social media appearances, memes, appearing with other people on other people's feeds, his own social media accounts, mixing humor with science, writing books, hosting his own podcast. It just goes on and on and on. So there's an awful lot we can go through. And I made a few thoughts on what I really draw out from looking at his career. And I just want to sort of run through some of that now with Kayley and see what we think are some of the most successful techniques. The first one, I've got a bunch of them. I mean, maybe if we just run through some of these points, Kayley, and you give me your thoughts too. The first one is in terms of media appearances. And we were kind of just talking about this, is the importance of having charisma. Some people have got natural charisma, some people haven't. And I think to a degree it can be trained, but you've got to have at least a sense that you can communicate with people and create a connection with them by chatting with them, haven't you?
So true. And it's always that like kind of comical side. It's like somebody that kind of has a sense of humor, an interesting personality. And yeah, it can be trained a little bit, but honestly, like I feel like it always comes down to somebody embodying their authentic self. Cause also if they're trying to like have charisma, I'm sure it could be like nerve-wracking and then it could get awkward and then they say something weird.
And you
But
sense
yeah,
it.
with Neil, I mean, he has it and he's like a fantastic interviewer, but yeah, charisma is big.
I mean, one of the memes that he came out with, and he's done some great tweets over the time that I spotted the other day again, was he said, the best evidence I can muster that humans are smarter than cats is that we don't chase laser dots on the carpet. And it's just a beautifully encapsulated, quick comment. It's a bit about science, but it's funny. It fits on Twitter. It's that kind of stuff, isn't it? That he's good at. It's kind of like Taylor Swift again.
Yeah, he's like quick-witted too, which is a really great side to his personality. But yeah, it's about like leaning into what are the traits about you that you feel are your best traits about your personality. For Taylor Swift, it's like she's very excitable. She's very like lovey-dovey. She's very, me with my friends. And she leans into that because that's who she is. And with Neil, yeah, he has the charisma. He has like that comical side to him. And he leans into that, and it's just intriguing. It's like if you embody your authentic self, you'll be a magnet to other people.
It's interesting. I was reading some kind of a biography of him, and he himself was saying that he was asked something about how aggressive you have to be to get to the top. And he said something like it's not about stepping on other people, but you've got to make sure that you're always pushing your way forward and going faster than other people. So he was kind of alluding to the fact of it is an aggressive dog eat dog world. But I guess it's a bit like with Taylor Swift. She kind of just got there by being nice. It's about focusing on the bits that are going to connect with people and just not talking about the rest of it.
Oh, totally. It's like you have to put your blinders up, especially in this world of like oversaturated content and everyone's telling you how to do things, how to not do things, and getting sucked into comparing yourself to other people. It's like people like Taylor Swift or Neil. It's like they have clearly put up their blinders. They've honed in on exactly what they want, who they are, what they're going for. And I think they both have been so successful because they've maintained the momentum by always taking action toward what they're trying to accomplish. And it doesn't have to be, stepping on toes. Obviously, Taylor Swift has done it in a very kind way. But yeah, it's like while other people are kind of looking around, consuming content, trying to do all the things, they are like laser focused on who they are wanting to become and who they're wanting to impact.
But it's also, isn't it? It's making sure that the stuff that you put out and the stuff that gets covered is the stuff that people will like. I mean, if I went in there as Niels and did a whole load of interviews about how I have pushed my career forward, while other people I've left behind, that's not going to resonate so well, is it? It's about making sure that you're focusing on those core messages that people will like.
I know, definitely. And also reanalyzing every step of the way and seeing, okay, is this working? Okay, this didn't work. And yeah, rather than it's like full steam ahead, but with intention.
I mean, one thing as well is an interesting one with TV, because obviously you've been, with the work that you were doing as well, is I say that TV has changed and it has so much. Do you think there are still good opportunities for thought leaders to work their way up to TV, and not just the big network stuff, but the smaller TV? I mean, what are the opportunities for TV these days, would you say?
I know there's definitely a trajectory. I've been thinking about this. It's like you have to start with the local news, work your way up to the more like maybe online national. And then, the Today shows and the GMAs are humongous and very, very powerful. But then there's things even bigger like Shark Tank or going on some of those more like game show or even documentaries. A documentary just came across my desk about an Amazon Prime show, and being a thought leader, kind of expert speaking in a documentary, that could be really huge, especially with streaming. I feel like leaning into these shows that can reach so many people on these streaming networks, I think that could be the way to go. That's kind of what I've been thinking about recently with my clients. Like, okay, once we reach the peak of the kind of TV news broadcast shows, then it's like, what's that next level? And I think it might be the streaming documentaries or the Shark Tanks, things like that.
That's really interesting. What about the partnerships? Because that does kind of tie into that as well. And Niels has been really good with this. He's gone on so many different shows. And then, I mean, the simple way that lots of people have done is that he's obviously doing a science podcast himself, but he invites on comedians rather than fellow scientists where they're just going to talk shop. So he's, I don't know, it's sort of interdisciplinary, isn't it? It's blending different communities and different interests together. I think that's been quite clever. Well, everyone's doing it, but it's still quite clever to do it and pick the right communities.
I know, and he's done it so well. I saw in an interview, he said that like him talking to celebrities and bringing celebrities into his conversation was his magic ingredient because they bring their humongous audiences to the conversation of science, and they put that conversation and by default Neil on the radar of their huge audiences. And it's just making his niche of science a lot more mainstream. And those partnerships are huge. I mean, it reminds me of when I would interview celebrities, and especially, and I may have mentioned this last time, but especially if a newer celebrity or more up and coming would come up to us, the publicist would kind of like bring them over. And I kind of knew who they were. And I was like, okay, how am I going to get something newsworthy out of this to get their coverage? And then I would quickly do some like research on my phone. And I'll go back to the Taylor Swift example. It's like any friend of Taylor Swift, if they were to do red carpet interviews, if you're a good celebrity journalist, one of your questions is going to be around Taylor Swift because that's the biggest news. She's the biggest person. But that's fine because it will still by default get them some coverage by tying them to their friend Taylor Swift. And so that's kind of what Neil did. It's like he's tying himself to these bigger celebrities, and it really does snowball with that momentum of partnerships.
There was one other thing that struck me with this, and I'm trying to remember the name of, he's an American talk show host, but Maya, what's his first name? Is it Maya? Oh,
Oh, shoot.
he did a podcast with he's, I never quite know how to label him politically because I think he describes himself as a Democrat, but he seems to be kind of anti-wokeism. Oh gosh, what's his name? I can't remember his name. But
Shoot.
he did an interview with this guy on the podcast the other day. And I was just a little bit surprised that he went on a show where the conversation was going to get into social justice and stuff like this. Here's this guy who's focused on science, on being fun. And it feels to me like it's a bit of, I get it, he's trying to reach maybe that market, but it feels like it's a bit of a dangerous game to get into that space when you're not being so politically active. I mean, would you be concerned if you're advising him?
Yeah, that would be very concerning. Um, yeah, I would definitely want to hone on like the messaging, but also you just never know what questions can be asked, and you just want to be so careful. Like having worked in celebrity journalism, especially during so many of these movements and so many people being quote canceled, me being the journalist looking for those quotes to basically find to not cancel people, but to like flag, that's scary. So anything that comes out of your mouth can be quoted, can be turned into a headline. Obviously, you need to stand for something and you can't please everybody. So that's certainly important. But it's like when it comes to more kind of contentious topics that might trigger people, I would stay away. But on the topic of science, like that can be more of a fun conversation for these celebrities with Neil. So yeah, it's being intentional with which conversations you're entering.
It was Bill Maher or Mayer. I'm not quite sure how you say it.
Oh, Bill Maher, yes.
Yeah, Maher. There we
Oh,
go. I got it wrong, but he went on there. So it's like,
yes, okay.
because even if I didn't see the interview, but I just heard about the story. The headline which was going around was the fact that they got into this debate about wokeism. So even if he went on there to talk about science, if the headlines are going to be about wokeism, it's getting off what you're trying to portray your own message as, isn't it? God, we can talk about that topic in itself. We've got to move on because we are running out of time. Okay, let's have a look at some of the comments that came in on the community bag. And we've got so little time. I'm going to move straight on to actually some of the comments that we had this week rather than questions. This was a comment from Francis Hawley from EMEA Comms at Reuters. And this was after I posted about that post on LinkedIn about press releases. And she said, as a journalist, I'd have binged these. This was a press release that just waffled on. As a PR manager for a major news corp, I've binged thousands of these over the years, she said. Key equals relevance and brevity. If it's neither, don't bother. Save your time by building relational approaches to relevant journalists with a genuine interest. PR folks, she said. It's just not worth your time spamming newsroom with bulky press releases. Editorial leaders just don't have time. I mean, this is what I was saying in my video, and this is how she reacted to it as well. I mean, I can't disagree with any of that. It's stop waffling, get to the point. I think we're
I
probably in agreement
know.
on that.
It's hard because also if you're a PR, it's like you like to write. So you have to like put your ego aside and be like, okay, I need to not write my like fun. I know this is really good, but no, we have to get to the point.
Yeah. Ivan from Pressworks as well said, you're totally right, Richard Mitten. A good press release should be able to make a reporter's life easier. What's It's saying they satisfy their editors' appetite for fresh content while servicing their clients' strategic needs. Absolutely. Can't disagree with that.
100%.
Right, let's just see if we can fit in one question very quickly. The question was, this is probably good for you as well again. Everyone's a content creator these days. So how do we keep things real and credible in PR when everyone's trying to be the next viral sensation? I've got a thought on this, but Kayley, what's your thought first?
Well, my mind initially went to having a proven track record. Like if your clients have a proven track record, for example, one of my clients, she's an HR expert and she has worked for a few decades for multiple like billion-dollar companies as head of HR. Or another one of my clients, he's an expert email marketer and he's generated over 120 million for his e-commerce clients. So like these proven track records show that these people are experts, they know what they're talking about. And so yeah, for me, it's a matter of communicating that expertise efficiently without extra fluff.
Yeah, I mean, my concern with viral stuff is often you don't really know why it goes viral. A lot of it
Yeah.
is humorous or quirky at that moment. It just captured people at that time. And it's like, I know speaking to people, often clients will say, I want something to go viral. And it's like, well, what do you want to achieve? Do you want a viral video that people will have forgotten in 5 minutes? Or do you want to build up a long-term campaign that achieves an actual result? And I think there's a really
Hmm.
different perspective there. It's virality. Yeah, great. If something goes viral, great. So be it. But ultimately, it's about building a campaign that is going to achieve a result rather than be forgotten tomorrow.
And when people say, oh, this went viral or I went viral, that term just means that it just holds less weight these days because people know how random virality is. And so you're right, it does come down to the long-term return of what you're building.
Katie, final question. What do you think is the biggest challenge in PR right now? And how do you think we should deal with it? I mean, what do you think is the biggest challenge?
Gosh, I think just connecting with the right people. I'm finding more and more that even with intentional, like we very much do intentional pitching. So we reach out to people who we know right about our client's industry and we really believe that they're interested. But even with that, I think it's that can be a challenge. Like their inboxes are so cluttered. So I think to help with that is to go back to the relationship building and connecting. And even if it's like a 10-minute Zoom, like let's connect face to face, let's connect human to human. What are you working on? Is there anything I can help you with? Or just like, where are you based? Like, let's get to know each other as friends and seeing if you can get somebody on a call or even sending them flowers for a feature. Small things that will help you be remembered, but also just help you to connect on a human level and show your like respect and appreciation for what they do. Yeah, I think
And
that could be really
being a
powerful.
useful source as well. I mean, I think
Yeah.
people often forget this is something that I was talking to John Woodruff about from an agency in the Netherlands the other day, is that it's like, even if it's not the story you're pushing, if you can help a journalist with something else, still do it.
Yeah.
Be
Oh
the
my
person
gosh.
that can tell them about a story that isn't even your client. If you become a
Yeah.
valuable source, they'll start talking to you just because you're useful. Yeah.
100%. I know, it's just humans helping humans. And yeah, they will very much respect and be grateful for that.
Kelly, it's always a massive pleasure having you on. What are you up to next? Any particular things that you're really excited about? You want to get your teeth into that you haven't
Oh
mentioned
my
today? Anything else?
Oh my gosh. Well, I really love the self-development kind of wellness industry. So we've been taking on some clients in that industry and have had huge success. Like the wellness industry has been hugely successful for our clients. Podcasts, articles, TV, all the things. So I'm really excited about leaning into that side. And I love how so many business owners today, founders, they have that like business expertise, but also the kind of self-development mindset side to them as well. And those who are honed on that and open and transparent to talking about that, I think is really powerful and something that I really resonate with. So yeah, I'm excited to lean into those industries moving forward.
It's funny you say that. I did a podcast as a guest a while back where they were talking about your career and where you wanted to go in the future. And at the time, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to do this. And I just thought, I'll give it a go. And it was actually really fascinating. I mean, almost putting the show aside completely, it was just the questions she was asking me and how it got me
Mm,
thinking about what I'd done in the past, what had motivated me. And it was,
yeah.
I guess it was like going to live therapy, I suppose,
Yeah.
in a podcast. But it was still quite fascinating, just the things that she was getting out of me. It was quite interesting. It's fascinating scope.
Yeah. And for somebody to listen to you, like somebody who looks up to you and admires you and wants to be where you are, for them to
Mhm.
have that inside look into how your brain works, what decisions you made that got you to where you are, like that is
Mistakes you made, the
invaluable.
flaws you have. Yeah.
The mistakes, that's
Yeah.
just invaluable information. So I love those types of interviews.
Kaylee, it's such a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much. And I hope you will come on again soon as well.
I would love that, Richard. Thank you so much for having me. It's always so much fun talking to you. So
I
thank
love
you.
connecting with you. Thank you so much, Kaylee. So there's a few things to say. If you're running a campaign or you're involved on the front line, the cold face, whatever you want to call it, of PR, let me know. I would love to get you on the show as a guest as well, so that we can discuss some of the stories that are going on in the world of PR and see what techniques we can pull out of it as well. You can find all the details if you go to the publicrelationspodcast.com and click on the menu link, which says the word guest. It's pretty obvious, but it's the word guest. And that has all the details on there about what we're doing with the show with the new format as well. Just a reminder, of course, that you can listen to us on all good podcast apps. That's where the majority of the listenership is. We are trying it now on YouTube as well. I'm not entirely convinced that YouTube is worth it for this particular show, but what the heck? We're putting it out there and see whether it grows or not. So you can always watch it on YouTube as well. Whatever you are up to in PR this week, I hope you are having an absolutely fantastic and successful week. Let me know what's going on. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search for Richard Midson, and I will speak to you again very, very soon.